Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's webinar with the Sport Coaching Leadership Program at Drexel University. Tonight, we're thrilled to have Elias with us to talk about building team identity. And this sort of fits with a bunch of the webinars we've had of late. Sarah McQuaid's webinar a couple of weeks back that's archived on the Drexel website for Sport Coaching Leadership talked about getting better at getting better. And two of the really popular ones, Karen Freeman, former nutritionist with the San Diego Chargers, and Tim McLaren talking about the fundamentals of coaching. And earlier today, we had Chris Snyder from the USOPC talking about the future of coaching. And next week, we'll have a buddy of mine from the UK, Jamie McPherson, talking about flow and the connections between business and sport. And then the same evening, a little bit later, Ellen Starowski will be talking about women in coaching. So lots of cool things happening. And the conversation tonight with Lee stemmed from an article that we've talked about quite a bit, looking at how do you build team identity. And this article by Aoyagi from 2008 talks about if you focus on leadership will build satisfaction. If you focus on the satisfaction, you'll lead to team cohesion, and team cohesion will build those desired behaviors. And so often people get focused on the cohesion piece and how that derails things. So Lee's going to talk to us. He was just telling me he's got a couple of books coming out. One, a new book being published in the next day or so. But we'll talk to us today about developing identity, how to develop this concept, and what our community has to do with that. And I think that's a really important piece, Lee, in terms of just what it is that we're dealing with around us. So in terms of community, in terms of the folks that connect. So hey, why don't you share your screen? And as you're getting ready, I just want to again welcome everybody to this evening's webinar. So Lee, over to you. I'll let you know when.
Yeah, Cam, thanks so much. Yeah. I'll talk for about a minute before I get going here. But first off, I want to thank you for having me. I always enjoy speaking at these things, and everybody that's attending tonight, thank you so much for being here. I really look forward to the Q&A section of this. So as Cam alluded to, I'm gonna go through a very quick presentation. I really do thrive on speaking with you, not at you. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of it. And just a real quick on me, I specialize in team building. That is kind of my niche when it comes to sports. And as many of you can guess, teams are teams, whether it's in sports or business or medical or nonprofit, for-profit, doesn't matter. So I've really been able to expand over the last few years by using my sports background to building teams in every facet that a team can possibly exist. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to go over today, specifically identity, works in everything, any team environment. So even you have your study teams, you have everything. So I'm really excited to talk about it and really excited to hear from you at the end of it. Am I good to just jump in, get going? Excellent. Okay.
So looks good. So you go for it.
Beautiful. All right. So as you can see, the title of this brief presentation is called The 1% Difference. And when I build teams, there's a few things. There's a lot of different qualities that you need to have, but there's a few that really make a huge difference. So when I say the 1% difference, this is the thing that the 1% of teams that really win a lot tend to have. Okay. So before we jump into identity by itself, I always like to establish the way I look at teams, right? And in my opinion, three things have to be present in order for a championship environment to exist. If these three things are not there, it will not happen. You will not win. Okay. So number one is pretty simple: talent. You have to have comparable talents within whatever facet you're in. If it's sports, you have to have athletes that know how to play the sport on some level comparable to the rest of the league. Same thing in business and school and everything. The next thing is tactics. Great talent cannot overcome bad tactics. A lot of times this is coaching, this is leadership, but you have to have tactics in place that are going to enable the talent to win the games. And then the last thing, and this is to me the most important thing, and again, this is what I specialize in, is the team bond. And I've made arguments throughout my entire time in this industry that the team bond is actually probably the most important thing, because without that, you really can't win. I joke all the time that if any of you listening have ever been on a championship team or a winning team, it's probably unlikely, impossible that you ever looked around after the championship and man, like, I really hate everybody here, but we won the championship. It doesn't happen, right? Bonded teams win. So when I speak to teams, I tell them that you need to focus 30% of time on team bonding. And they think I'm crazy. They think I'm crazy because it's just too much time. But hopefully I'm going to show you today why it's so important and why it's an integral piece. So again, when I talk about this stuff, these are all the main topics that I go over when I'm working with an organization or I'm working with a team. It's all of these together kind of create that team bond. But today I'm just going to be talking about identity. And that is one of the 1% things that great teams have. Okay. So when you think about what identity is, it's really a tangible thing that everyone can grab onto that says, this is who we are. This is why we play. When I work with teams, the first day I usually have a team building session. And one of the questions I ask is, what do you want to do this year? Right. And 90% of the time, I want to win, coach. I want to win. And I kind of look at them like, I'm sure you do, right? Everyone wants to win. Like, that's not a good answer. Why do you want to win? Who are you? Who are you? What's your identity? What makes you different than the other 99 teams in the league that's going to make you win? That's what I want to know. That's kind of what you look at when you think of identity. Now, the next few slides are going to be a flurry of pictures. All right. I'm from Philadelphia, born and raised. Another reason why I love helping with Drexel. Okay. This was a picture I waited my entire life to get. All right. The 2018 Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl champions, Nick Foles. This team had an identity. They were underdogs. I remember going into the Super Bowl week thinking, please put the Patriots as the favorite to win because this team thrives on being the underdog. So much so that you had the dog hats on. We were just known as that underdog team. They wanted to be the underdogs. They grappled around this as a team that never won. All right. And for those of you who might remember, Trent Kelsey gave this unbelievable speech that was just all about how unique this team was and how they were all underdogs. And that's how they identified. That surged them to a championship. And don't underestimate that gave them that little bit of edge in that game, right? They had a strong identity. Okay. This is another team, NC State. So if you guys watch 30 for 30, that video on this team is called Survive and Advance. This is a team that had no place winning the NCAA tournament, okay? But their coach, who was famous, said Survive and Advance, and they took that underdog identity. And again, underdog is always an easy identity to get. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But they took this to a completely different level. Just survive and advance together. They had a strong identity. I recommend this 30 for 30 for everyone if you want to see a piece on identity. An amazing coach, an amazing team, an amazing time. And then, when you look at national identity, which is also a big one, anytime you watch the Olympics, and it's not just limited to the USA, which you see here, but the identity to say, I'm fighting for my country, right? I'm representing my country. It's an identity that has spawned some pretty unbelievable performances at the Olympic and world level that we've all seen. And not all of them are winning performances. Sometimes it's like the Jamaican bobsled team, right? There's a movie about that called Cool Runnings, which is they didn't even place. But the idea was they were representing their country, and this became a source of national pride for that bobsled team. And they still have a bobsled team today in Jamaica. It's not something you think of when you think of Jamaica, but there's a strong identity there. So this goes to show that there's different types of identity, and identity can spur you to some amazing things. Now, this next slide's a funny one because I actually hate using this slide, but it's so good at proving my point I have to. This is Tom Brady. Some of you may have heard of him. He's the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL. And what I've done here is I put together a picture of the same moment from every single Super Bowl he's ever won, from 2002 to 2019. So this is the moment pretty much right after the Lombardi Trophy is handed over. And if you look closely at these pictures, you can really see the identity of each one of those teams. By the way, it's a lot easier to use this slide since the Eagles won. I'm not going to lie to you because we beat him, but that's not the point. Okay. The point is, if you look at your screen, 2002, his first championship, that picture says, I can't believe I'm a Super Bowl champion. Nobody thought we could win. Nobody thought that we could beat the Rams and win the Super Bowl. Right. The second one is clearly like, wow, they say the second one's the sweetest. We really accomplished something here. The third one, 2005, we are a dynasty in the NFL. You can tell just by looking at his face. 2015, it's been 10 years. We're proud of our team. We've won again. 2017 is my favorite one because he's screaming some of you might not remember, this is the year he was suspended 3 games for Deflategate. That picture always says to me, I hate Roger Goodell. Just him fighting back, saying, we're going to win. And then 2019 is very much the cherry on top of his career. He's with his daughter. They've won the Super Bowl. Again, you'll notice, again, I got to say this, 2018 is missing because he didn't win, because the Eagles won. I just want to say that. And if you follow Tom Brady at all now, you can see that he's establishing his identity already down in Tampa Bay with the Buccaneers. He wasn't going to go there and allow them to be looked at as losers anymore. I firmly believe that part of his negotiation was, you're going to change your jersey, you're going to put pictures of me out, and we're going to be synonymous with winning because I'm here. We're going to create a winning identity in Tampa Bay. Tom Brady is one of the few athletes on earth that could probably pull off that power as an individual athlete, but I'm sure his teammates appreciate it. Again, individual identity year after year with Tom Brady. When you look at organizational identity, and this is the easiest way to create identity within your own teams if you're a coach. This comes down to making sure that the players, the coaches, the staff, and it really is everyone together as a team, understand the purpose and the belief within your organization. And you have to create what you see on the screen. There was a team before me. There will be a team after me. The team is larger than me. Making sure that you establish this, especially with athletes in high school and college, is super, super important, okay? Because it creates a little bit of selflessness and it creates a lot of accountability, all right? And make no mistake, that's a big part of identity, is understanding that this team is not just about you, if I'm speaking to an athlete or a coach. It's not about one person, it's about the team. So when you look at this on the kind of micro levels, right? In the locker room is the first one. I lived in the United Kingdom for 3 years. I worked in professional hockey over there. I worked with a team called the Peterborough Phantoms. And when I showed up with this team, I was hired as an assistant coach and a marketing director, because this is a small market EU team. The first thing I did was redo the entire locker room. I started putting imagery up of their past, of when they won. I started putting visuals of words I wanted them to understand. Accountability, 60 minutes, which is the length of a professional ice hockey game. That's how long we have to work. As a team, our identity is we work for 60 minutes and don't stop, right? I created that within the locker room. Now, when I showed up, this team was horrendous. They were second to last place in the league. The following year, we, as a team, won the championship, which was, we were picked again to be second to last. And we ended up winning the championship. And a lot of the players came up to the coaching staff, which I was part of, and said, man, you really gave us a reason to win. We represented the city of Peterborough. We represented this team that had a really rich history in professional hockey, but had not been good. And we challenged them. We dared them. Be part of that history. The team was here before you. The team will be here after you. The team is bigger than me. How are you going to be remembered? More recently, inner city Philadelphia and Frankfurt. I worked with the high school football team called the Pioneers, which I always say this team taught me more than I've probably taught them, being in the inner city. When I showed up, similar situation. The photo on the left is the locker room the day I started on the job, okay? Again, I serve as a team builder, as an assistant coach. I rarely serve as a head coach anymore. The picture on the left was the locker room the day I showed up. Legit, trophies in the bathroom, on the floor, and rats running around the locker room. That is not an exaggeration. And I walked in, and the coach kind of said, you see what I mean? And I looked at him, I said, this is great. This is perfect. And he thought, what do you, there's rats on the floor. I said, this is the perfect starting point to build an identity, right? Picture on the right, that's the football varsity football team starting to clean up the locker room, bringing in boxes of rugs, taking out the trash, right? Next player, again, first day. And we started putting rugs in on the right side, right? We started giving it. We had the players, this is very important, had the players help them put the carpet down, help them clean up the locker room. We had the players make sure that their training room on the left, which was day one, had something that looked more like a training room like you see there on the right for day two. We had the players and the students at the school come in. I want you to paint. This looks familiar if you look at my other picture. Paint our logo on the walls. Paint some words, service, accountability, right? Once a pioneer, always a pioneer. Frankfurt football's slogan is home of champions. This is the team that had not won in a long time and was known for winning, right? We made them have that identity, okay? Very important. How do you feel, and again, this is a rhetorical question for now, how do you think the players treat the locker room that they built, right? And this is in a very underserved area of Philadelphia. So the locker room is a lot nicer than a lot of their homes. How do you think they feel now going to that place of solace in the inner city that they built? Do you think there's an identity there? Teams started winning right away, right? It's an ongoing project. Outside the locker room, this is one of my favorite stories to tell. and I'm getting to the end here. Leicester City Football Club. In 2015, 2016, in the English Premier League, they were picked to be dead last, right? They had 5,000 to 1 odds to win the EPL, and they had 1/5 the top salary in the league, okay? So for those of you who follow professional soccer in England, this is one of the greatest stories of all time. I love this slide. This shows some other things that are worse than 5,000 to 1 odds. All right. Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson, which actually happened, was 37 to 1. And that was a long shot. Skipping through these, Kim Kardashian becoming president in 2020, 2001 odds for that. Elvis being alive, 2001. Hitting a hole in one, 3,631 to 1. Leicester City winning the league in 2016, 5,000 to 1. Well, guess what happened? They won the league. All right. They come in, they won the league. This was so crazy this year. I was living in England when this happened. Okay. Halfway through the season, they were poised to win. All of the betting places in England, all right, which is legal there. It's legal here now too. It wasn't at the time. All of them were throwing money at people that bet on Leicester City, saying, hey, listen, we'll pay you out now half of your winnings, because they know it's going to bankrupt them at the end of the season if they win. All right. So nobody believed they could win. Now, how did they do it? How did they do it? It's funny. There's books about this team. It all comes down to this. The coach and the team had a team bond, and they had an identity, a massive underdog identity, number one. But they credited their winning as every time they won, they'd have a pizza party. They were together all the time. Right? It sounds obvious, but after people saw this, they would still hear. How did they do it? How did you really do it? They were bonded more than any team in the league. They had a stronger identity than any team in the league. All right. Now, one of the funny things about English soccer is coaches get sacked, fired all the time over there. The next season, they fired the coach, team, just nosedived again. Because it's again, identity is something that is not taken seriously enough. All coaches will tell me, I get it. We need identity. We need a team bond. But they don't practice it. They don't take the time every week to keep establishing that team bond, part of the identity, right? The final one is when you look at identity as a whole, keeping it micro, is location, the community, and the fans. This is a slide I recently updated. With what's going on in the world right now, there's actually a lot of stories with this right now, with different communities coming up together and making their voices heard. But I'm going to use a sports one here. It's the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Okay, this is an NHL team that showed up 3 seasons ago, and it was an experiment. The first professional team in Las Vegas history. Nobody knew how they were going to do. The somber part of the story is about a week or 2 before the season started, there was that massive shooting in Las Vegas where the guy was in one of the casinos and started raining down on a concert. Terrifying, horrible, okay? 58 people perished in that, right? So Vegas took it upon themselves in the right way, because you can do this the wrong way too, to really make sure that they were there for their community. And from the very start of the season, they were all over letting the Vegas community know, which is a very tight-knit military community. There's a lot of people that live in Las Vegas outside of Las Vegas, if you know what I'm trying to say, the casinos. And they really embraced this tragedy, and they told the fans, we are going to give you something to help us get back on our feet. They didn't try and replace it. They did it the right way. Long story short, this team in their first season ever went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. They eventually lost to the Washington Capitals, all right, but solidified themselves with that city. So much so, and this is kind of funny, that if you wonder how much the people identify with this team, there was a NHL poll this week. This is the funny part of this, in which they were ranking what's the best mascot in the NHL. Now, we all know the answer in Philadelphia of who the best mascot is in Philadelphia, or in the country. It's Gritty. Gritty's the best mascot in hockey. The Fanatic is the best mascot in sports. Come at me if you don't agree. But Vegas was so strong, they voted their mascot as the number one mascot in the NHL. His name is Chance. He's a snake, whatever. I still stand by Gritty. The point is this. They're so committed to their team that whenever the team needs them, their fans are there. That's a strong identity. Do you think that affects the team? Because it does. Because every one of those players is really enthralled with that team. So again, the biggest example of team identity, this is actually the reason that I got into coaching, is the 1980 Olympic hockey team. I will just say this, because I could talk on this team literally for hours. The head coach of this team, Herb Brooks, took the 1980 Olympic hockey team, which is known as the greatest sports moment of the 20th century. He took kids, college kids, pretty much from Minnesota and Boston who didn't get along. He bonded them together under the flag of our country, that you are not from Minnesota, you are not from Boston anymore, you are from America. And they went out and beat the Soviet hockey team, which was the greatest hockey team in history. College kids versus someone compared this one time, it would be like if the Yankees beat the Giants at football. That's how crazy this was. And they went out and won the gold medal. Again, there's so much literature and film and documentaries on this. I'm not going to go into it, but the coach understood that he had to blur the boundaries of our country and make a team so solidified that they identified as not just as Team USA, but as hockey players that could beat the greatest team in the world. And they did. There's a reason they call it miracle on ice, right? Understood that he needed to bond them and he needed to give them an identity. He did that and they ended up winning. So some of the questions that we're going to get and go back and forth. How do you create this with your team? Hopefully we're going to talk about that. And can you create an identity that's worth buying into? Again, it's not enough just to say, yes, we want to win. It's not an identity. All right. And that is the quick, brief, abbreviated 1% difference that a lot of teams share. So with that said, Cam, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. I'm going to answer the questions you have, and I'm looking forward to talking with all of you.
Yeah, love it, Lee. I mean, that's exactly what I think. Nice reminder, 2018. I was lucky enough to be at the up there at the Super Bowl, so to see that
lucky man
was that was a special one. But you speak to, I think for all of us, the idea of how do you create it, and particularly right now, there's all kinds of curveballs being thrown at people. What's your advice to folks that are struggling with, hey, do we have what we want? If we don't, how do we get it? What's your advice on that one?
Sure. Well, when it comes specifically to identity, the beauty of identity is that every single year, even if you're coaching the same team with the same players, the identity can change, right? Because sports is a living thing. So you really got to sit down with the team. And again, accountability plays into this too, right? You really want to make sure that they get a grip on what kind of team we're going to be, right? So start out with the basic things of, what town do we represent? What city or what country? Again, that can get very macro. Who do we represent? Who are we playing for, number one? This starts to build that, hey, there's an identity here. Is it a school? Is it a physical location, right? Then the next thing is, how are we going to play the game? And why are we going to play that way? Well, the question I usually ask teams is, what will other teams say about us when they leave our building or when we're done playing with them? That's an identity. I want them to feel like, we might not be the best team, again, given the underdog kind of strategy. We might not be the best team. We might not win a game this year, but you're going to earn a win against us, right? That's an identity that can reverberate beyond just one season, right? Maybe there's, again, I would never harvest this purposely ever, but tragedy can become an identity, as I talked to about with Vegas. Obviously, you would never hope for that, okay? But when something, and the world is going through something right now, when something happens, you want to wrap yourself in the right way around that. I'll give you another example with the Philadelphia Flyers, who we're having a great season, and hopefully we'll continue to if the NHL resumes. But they really found their stride this year when one of their teammates, Oscar Lindblom, was diagnosed with cancer. It really changed the team, and you could see that. So I'm going to say this again. You would never hope for that, ever, okay? But there are little identities everywhere that you have to understand. You have to make it that you're playing for more than just wins or just to play the game, right? So you got to find those things and really find a way to get your players to wrap around them. And again, ask your players what kind of team they're going to be. Don't just tell them. If you ask your players, who do we identify as? And they tell you, well, they got to own it now at this point, right? I think one of the mistakes, if you want to say this, that coaches make is sometimes volunteering too much. This is how it's going to be or how I see it. Right? That's not a team philosophy, right? The team they're playing the games. They got to tell you how they're going to play. And then a coach guides them through that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't suggest. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be like, well, what about this? What do you guys think of this? Ultimately, they have to own the identity, because if it's just one man waving the flag, if they're not following you, it's not going to work out.
No. And that definitely speaks to the concept of ownership. And I think one of the reactions that I hear often is, oh, they just don't get it. This younger generation, they're in their machines and they just don't get it. What's your response on that one to the generation gap?
Yeah, my first response on that is when the radio came out, coaches probably said that about the radio, and the
Yep.
TV came out, they probably said that about the TV, and the same thing with the internet and the mobile version. Look, every generation is different. Every generation is the same. If a coach is saying that, the first thing I'm going to say is, are you listening as much as you're talking? It's a very harsh reality for a lot of coaches, especially coaches that have been doing this for a long time, right? The best coaches I know, regardless of age, understand this. I know nothing when I come into a season, right? Coaches have to change year after year because you really serve your team as much as they have to serve you, right? If you're not going to be flexible with what it is that motivates them, it's not going to work. Another common mistake, speaking to what you just asked, a lot of coaches and a lot of leaders, actually, this isn't just in sports, just kind of assume, well, everyone's motivated the way I am. I got yelled at as a kid and that motivated me. So I'm going to yell at you because that's going to motivate you. And that's just not true. All right. You know, if you yell at someone that's not motivated that way, you're going to shut them down. So going back to what you're asking, one of the questions I ask as a coach of every player, everyone, even the coaching staff, is what motivates you and what demotivates you. And I take it a little bit with a grain of salt. Okay. But if you can establish trust, which is something I'll get into in a minute, and get truthful answers. And a player says, look, I'm really not motivated when I get yelled at. Okay. I'm motivated when you sit me down and you tell me, and, you know, as a coach, you say to the player, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to try that. I'm going to sit down and talk to you. Right. And I'm going to make sure that I get through to you, but you can't make the same mistake 3 times. Right. That's the type of communication that needs to happen. But look, if you talk about the generational gaps, because again, they're always there. I think it's a really lazy excuse when coaches say that. All right. That's not coaching, right? You need to find a way to communicate with your players. And, you know, Nick Saban is a great example of a coach that he has to find new ways every year to talk to his players. And he's humble enough to know that he's a football god, but know that he's not a football god because they just listen to him. It's because he also listens to them, right? It's a two-way road. So I you know, it's frustrating at times. I'm not going to lie. I'm not saying it's not frustrating, but find a way. Maybe get down to their level a little bit or bring them up to yours, whatever.
Yeah, the excuse list is long, and I think that's, you know, to the example of survive and advance, of being really present, of what worked last year may not work this year. What works next door probably won't work where you are, and so that idea of just being really present. You know, a lot of the research that comes up that I've been hearing about lately is mental toughness. You know, what is it? What does that represent? You know, and challenges are foot everywhere, and you can come in with full of confidence and really committed, but just going the wrong way. So what's your response, or what are your comments to what are the controllables? What, you know, when you think about that 1%, what are some of those things that you really can do something about?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. All championship teams have a level of trust, and I did say I allude to that in a minute. So number one, a controllable thing is you have to establish trust on your team. So when I work with teams or I interview with teams, and I always joke that when I interview with a team, it's actually a two-way interview because I got to want to work with you too. And one of the things I go over right away is, you know, I ask, and I'm asking everybody here, it's a little rhetorical, but I say, can you define trust without using trust in the definition? And I'm always amazed. People have a really hard time defining the word trust. And the real reason is because trust is really more of a feeling, right? And there's different levels to trust. I always joke, you know, you're not going to trust your postman or woman to watch your kids for a few hours, right? But you will trust them to bring your mail every day, right? So there's levels to trust. So the first thing I do in the controllable is establish what this is. And I have my teams come up with a communal definition of this is what trust is on this team, right? And the basic trust is always, it's the reliance on somebody else. But like I said, when I talk about those Frankfurt kids, most of those kids grow up with one parent or less. All right. Completely different, you know, world where murder is a very realistic daily threat. Trust to them means something different than what it probably means to me. So I want to establish that number one as a controllable. Once that's established, you can really start doing some amazing things because you start getting truthful answers. You start getting real accountability from these players. Those are some of the controllables. Then you know, and this is one of the things with coaching that I really love to do is getting down nitty gritty with each athlete, which not every head coach can do, right? One of the things is, you know, delegation is really important when it comes to coaching. You know, you might not be the emotional leader on your team as the head coach, and that's okay, right? I get down with each player, like I said, what motivates you? What demotivates you? Why are you here? What do you want to do this season? right? Really get down to it, because what I want out of each athlete as a coach is maximum performance and maximum effort, right? Mental toughness, which you spoke about, is often alluded to as just, hey, man, I'm cut. I'm going to rub some dirt on it and get back up. And that is part of it. But there's also an emotional side to this, all right? In belief, in understanding what makes a person tick, and making sure that, part of trust and part of family is making yourself vulnerable to each other, right? And allowing yourself to open up. All the best teams I've been a part of or seen are willing to open up. And you see them crying in each other's shoulders when they win. One of the things I'm kind of studying myself right now, which I find fascinating, and I won't go on this too much, but is, I always say birds are born knowing how to fly. Different animals are born knowing how to do. I've got 2 children, 6 and 3. I can confirm human children are born knowing how to feel, right? They know how to feel. If my daughter was hungry as a baby, I was going to get screamed at. She's upset. She can't tell me she's upset, but she's upset. Okay. We're told how to fear. Now, what do we hear most of our lives? Don't cry. Don't talk back. Don't feel. Don't do it. It's a mistake in a lot of ways. Okay. You have to learn how to control your emotions, obviously. Okay. But feeling, especially when you talk about a team bond, we talk about championships, we've all felt that. If you've won, you've felt that fire in your heart. Right? I want to bring that out of my athletes every day, every practice, every game, especially the championship, right? You can find those things if you just dig a little bit deeper into the athletes or bring someone in who can.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got folks from all different types of sports at all different levels. And you bring to mind a book that some of you have heard me talk about, Sapiens. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this one, but for me, the theme in this one, and if you've got other resources that speak to this, hey, please share them. But Sapiens for me is a book about believability, that over the history of mankind, we believe in something, whether it's the apple as a product, whether it's a Bible, whether it's, the Philadelphia Eagles. There's a level of belief that we have. And Sam, I love your question because it's a brilliant one. We've all been in those positions where our team, whether as athletes or coaches or whatever in the support network, where they go through a rough patch.
Yes.
So Lee, what's your comment to that? When we hit a rough patch, after a winning stretch, what do you say? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. In my book, I talk about the most vulnerable times for a team, and there's 2 of them. It's a winning streak and a losing streak. Yes. You're equally as vulnerable during both of those streaks, for multiple reasons. And the thing I tell coaches is you can prepare for both. The mistake, in my opinion, the mistake a lot of teams make is when you go into a season, you don't prepare your team mentally for what happens if we win 20 games in a row or if we lose 10 games in a row. All right. I talk about that day one. Like, this is what mental toughness is with this. We may go through a winning streak. We may not. Whatever it is, we have to stay even keeled all the time. I always use my little hand waves. Like, you got to keep it even keeled. And then you got to take it a moment at a time. Because if you focus on just us and you focus just on yourselves and who we are, the problem will typically take care of itself. I think another thing too is, when your emotions get too high or too low, you can make some really bad decisions at either place. I mean, we've seen this teams win and win and win. They lose a game. You can even see this in, UFC. It happened to Ronda Rousey. She was undefeated and she all of a sudden couldn't win again. All right. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just when you're on that high and mentally you can't lose and you tell yourself you can't lose and then you lose, right? Your whole belief system crumbles down. So I try and keep my teams realistic of what is the actual goal, because the goal is not a winning streak, right? The goal is not the winning streak. The goal is the championship or whatever our goal is, right? And then when it comes to losing streaks, I also find that teams typically don't ask the right questions during a losing streak. Why are we losing? That's not the right question. And then they start going minutia into like, well, it's this tactic, it's that tactic, it's this line, it's this combination. And in 99% of the time, it's a mental block, right? If it's not a talent thing, right? And it's not why are we losing? It's what are we thinking that's causing us to lose? What are we afraid of? Again, this goes back to being vulnerable. What are we afraid of? Acceptance, the way we're being judged. It's amazing when you start talking about these things, how the losing streak will just fizzle away when you start to address it, because you don't know the question to answer. But above all, to answer your question, it's preparedness. This is something you need to talk about constantly throughout the season. of what happens if we get on a winning streak or a losing streak. How are we going to take it? If a team is mentally prepared for that and they say, we got to stay even keeled, we got to keep pushing forward, they're going to have a much better chance of breaking out of that or staying in it or hitting their goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, preparation is a critical one. I think extending on the question, it's what happens when the unanticipated happens.
Yes.
When you think, hey, we've done everything we need to do, we're prepared, and you're in the middle of a competition, and a season's one thing, but what about the championships? What about when there's an elimination where there isn't another go at it, there isn't a second round? It's you're in, you win, and you're in, and if you see you later, you're out. And I think those are the situations where, for many of us, you feel like you're prepared, and then you get in, and it's like the oh no moment of now what do we do? And I think that's an extension on that, but even more complicated probably.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I'll simplify it. People like that, right? I have two philosophies that really govern how I live, and it's amplified in sports, right? And this is how I teach my teams to do it and how I do it. All right, is two things. One is I call it circle of control. All right. And all of you listening can do this as an exercise at home, right? You draw a little circle on a piece of paper and that's your control circle, and write all the things that you control in your life. Okay. I'll give you kind of the cheat sheet here. You don't control hardly anything in your life, right? You control very little. You control pretty much what you put in your body, your effort, and your emotional state for the most part. That's about it. You don't really control anything else. And then I say draw a big circle outside of it of everything you don't control. Traffic, weather, the Kardashians, politics. I mean, there's a lot of things in that outer circle, okay? To a point, okay? And I say when it comes to sports, you have to only focus, and I mean only focus on the things that you control. You don't control the standings or the table. You don't control what other teams are doing on another night. You don't even control what the other team's doing that you're playing. And you don't even control your own teammates. So what do you control? Your effort, your mental state, and what you're going to put out tonight and what you put in your body, okay? If a whole team is only focused on what they control, a lot of unnecessary focus on other things goes out the window. So that's the first thing. That will make you very focused. The second thing is being in the present moment. And this is something that a lot of writers are starting to talk about more and more and more. It's a bigger practice. Phil Jackson is a master of this. If you watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, they alluded that he and his ability to do this is incredible. And this is one of those concepts that's easy to understand and really hard to put into practice. And it's this simple. The past has already happened. The future has not happened yet. Therefore, they are not real. The present moment, this conversation that I'm having with you, Cam, and everybody listening, I love my children, I love my wife. This is reality right now, is the only thing that really matters in terms of, the present moment. Obviously, I love my children. All right. But this is it. And my wife. All right. Yeah, you feel like I have to say that. But this is reality. And most people live in the past. Or as you just said a few minutes ago, what happens if we don't win this game?
Yeah.
You can't afford to think that way if you're an athlete, because all that matters is right now. Now, this is the kind of eye-opener for me. I find when it comes to sports and life, most people live in the circle of things they don't control and in the past or the future. Very few people focus on what they control and live in the present moment. And it's not easy. This is something I practice all the time. I'm guilty every day of phasing in and out of these places. You got to practice like anything else. You will not win if you're in the past, the future, and in the area you don't control. So like you say, when you hit that oh no moment, or you hit that, wow, I have to win this game, in those games, I get extremely focused. I'm the guy on the bench that's not showing any emotion until the clock hits zero. And then even when that happens, it might take a minute, right? Like, because I'm just so focused on what I control and what I can do in the moment. And that still comes into athletics when I play, adult league player now. But it's just, it's a great practice for your life and for sports. To me, those are the two keys. A little bit of a long answer. Those are the two keys to being successful.
No, I love it. I love it because I think that's, they're the concrete, examples of what can you do. And like you say, being present it's the easiest thing in the world to say. And so often it's the hardest thing in the world to do because
very hard.
I think, my experience with some of the guys in Major League Baseball, when there's, the stadium's full, the count's full, You know, if you mess up, it's over. Your career may be over. And how do you reset and say, okay, all I have to do is one thing. It's throw this ball from point A to point B and do that to the best of my ability. Outside the fact that the whole world might be watching you, or it might feel like the whole world's watching. I think that's another ism that connects quite nicely with David's question here. You know, he's a first year startup coaching a startup program. How do you build identity from scratch?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually a sscenario that I've been part of several times when it's a brand new team. The identity is the team, all right? Because here's the deal. I'm going to guess it's a situation you're probably not going to win a lot of games, and you know that. So you're saying, how do I build an identity when we might not win anything, right? Well, one is be realistic with your team about what you may accomplish this year. Here's the identity, and this is why first-year teams are very special, all right? That team will solidify the future identity for all teams. It's very important. You said his name was David? David, it's very important that you let the athletes on this team know that the identity that they set, there's two parts to this, that they set will fortify and be the foundation identity for this franchise or this team forever. And then you have to tell them this, and this is very important. You will never be forgotten for doing this as being the first team. We will take a picture, we will put it on the wall, and every team from now on will know that you are the identity, the foundation that started this program. Mm-hmm. And when we win, and we will win eventually a championship, it will come back to you. People will know you. You will win too whenever we win in the future, right? That's a great starting point to tell your team. And it's true too. I've done this with the program before where I say, you will never be forgotten. You could lose every team, but you could lose every game, But if you set the right foundation here, it will create a string of champions. It will be because of you. That's an identity that first-year teams typically can buy into. And it's realistic. If you go in there and say, hey, we're going to win every game this year, and you lose every game, and I'm not saying you're going to do that, David, but that's not an identity that's realistic, right? You have to be realistic about the identity.
That reminds me of a couple of examples I've been around as well, where, the two most powerful responses we have are, yes, that's really good, and no, that's not good enough. And if you start off at the beginning by almost reinforcing what's not good enough, what's not the standard, it's okay to say, hey, that was terrible, but if we do this, it'll be a little less terrible. You don't have to go from terrible to great overnight, so that idea of just incremental moments, even if, hey, there are first-time teams that have been successful. It doesn't have to be the prerequisite because it's a first-time round that it's not going to be successful. But that idea of incremental, the process of building confidence, that every day you just get a little bit better, it builds off itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's two sides to that, right? Like if winning a championship typically is like, you're playing their best game at the time you need to be playing your best game. Like, there's very few teams that you can look at in history that started out as the team and then they ended up as the team. Actually, more often than not, that's not the way it plays out. Here's another question for the coaches out there. What's your win, right? Like, what is your win? Why are we here? I talked about that earlier. The win might not be the championship. Winning can be defined however you want it to be defined. If you're a first-year program, David, who asked that question, what is your win? I mean, I can't answer that for you. What is your win, though? Is it going 500? Is it just establishing a strong presence that, like I said before, when teams play you, what are they going to say? We didn't win a lot this year, but every team knows that we tried really, really hard. That might be the win. For some schools, winning has just been, I need to graduate my students from the high school. Again, it can go different directions. And obviously the top level, the win, at the top professional level where I've worked at, it's always winning the championship. I mean, I get that. But how? Why? Why do we need to win it? Why do we deserve to win it? So winning, as you said, it can be all over the place. It's not just necessarily just to getting a trophy.
And like you said, I think you said it beautifully a little earlier, just to reinforce how important it is to ask them, ask the athletes, ask the community, ask if there are parents, ask the stakeholders, because I think that's certainly one thing, Lee, we've talked about a little bit, but what's going on right now around. I don't think anybody in my circle has said, what do the athletes want? We're talking to doctors. We're talking to government officials. We're talking to, all these people. What do they want to do? Okay. And if their answer is, we want to get back to playing,
Yeah.
Part of our responsibility is to say that may not be safe right now. What else can we do given we know all this other information? But to take it back and say, okay, what do you as a group, what do we as a community think? Do we all have buy-in? I think that's a powerful thing. Are there things, Lee, that you've seen in the last couple of months that either reinforce, some age-old principles or anything that's sort of really creative? You thought, hey, I wish we knew that before all this, but now we know it. Let's make sure we keep doing it.
I think every day I see something like that right now. It actually goes back to what the book Sapien you were talking about, which is I have this theory that people want to be part of something larger than themselves. Even on the introvert level, they want to be part of something. And I think that what's unique and funny is that even in our country, with everything that's going on, and again, we're not going to get specific on this, but whether it's political or coronavirus or sports, you see every day some people pick sides, right? And we pick sides because we want to be part of something, all right? People also want to be right, right? They want to feel right, which is a whole nother level about ego and things like that. But we're constantly wanting to be in teams. So this is what I see. I see, and again, this is a hopeful proposition. I'm an optimist, but I hear every day about being farther apart than we've ever been, but we're also yearning more than ever to be part of something together. And it just comes down to leadership of, how are we going to get there? Now, when it comes to coronavirus, I have been amazed at the human capacity for helping each other. So one of the things that I see, and again, I live right outside the city, is when I walk now, I notice people actually are kind of going out of the way and say, how you doing? Or getting out of the way. And, there seems to be just a lot of more concern for each other, even though it's kind of unsaid. Now, that's not everywhere. Right? I acknowledge that right away. But it's almost like a human experiment to see what we will do. Also, we're not culturally, as Americans, Cam, you could probably talk about this more than I could, but we're not conditioned for this type of situation. We're very much about what we want when we want it. And that's why I think some of the countries in Europe have had an easier time squashing this thing, because people conform very quickly in other forms of government. Again, I don't want to get into that, but as the team that we're in, I'm seeing a lot of good. You won't see that on the news because they're not in the business of telling you good things. But when I look around outside, I say, live in the moment, get outside my house. I see people wanting to help each other for the most part, right? And I see that as the team that we're in right now, most of the country as a team did what they were supposed to do to make sure we're taking care of our neighbors. Again, I hear the stories about people not doing that. I personally think that's a minority in terms of people not helping each other. For the most part, 315 million people in this country, probably 314 million of them are doing what they can to help each other. That's inspiring to me. Again, the news is going to report on that 1 million that's not, but that's inspiring to me. So I think it just shows the capacity for our ability to work together when we want to.
And again, it's amazing how these questions are coming up, but Caitlin brings up a great question of, when you've got younger athletes and there's powerful forces outside of the group, whether it's parents, whether it's, the history, sometimes the history isn't great. So how do you turn around, say the buy-in of parents that either don't have the right perspective or they see it different to you as the coach, and here you are thinking, okay, I've got to work with these athletes, and then you turn over to the side of the field, or you get out of practice and you think, oh my God, the problem isn't the athletes I'm dealing with. The problem is the parents or the board or the AD or whoever. What are your comments to that one? Because I think it's a great question.
It is a great question. Thanks for that question, Caitlin. I'll tell you, I've been known to say the parents ruin everything, as half joking, but it's true, right? But and when it comes to youth sports, especially, this comes back to what I was saying about control. You really have to identify what you do and don't control in these situations. And one of the things we don't control is young athletes' parents in their ears, right? So one of the things this goes back to trust 100%. I really try and create a really strong trust environment, as strong as I can. And again, depending on the level, this changes how easy it is to do. But I want my players to know, look, there's a space when we're together that it's our space. And I'm trusting that all of you are going to keep that in our space. And that in that little circle, that's our trust zone. And anything that happens outside of this is kind of happening outside of this, right? I'm also very upfront with parents. And yes, some parents are just not going to get this, all right? I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but I try and communicate with parents. And this is my rule. In high school or below, I have a meeting with the parents, and I tell them what I'm expecting from their kids, and I let them ask questions, and I set very firm rules for the team. And I always tell them, I'm very upfront, if you have a problem with my rules, let me know. I'll be happy to discuss it with you, but this is my area. This is my team. These are my rules, okay? It's not always a comfortable conversation. That's high school and below. When it gets to college, I tell the parents, your kids are in college. Respectfully, I need them to make some of these decisions now, not you, okay? When it gets to pro, I don't talk to parents, all right? But when it comes down to the youth organization, I understand that there's forces sometimes it seems like it's working against you. You have to identify those things early, because here's the deal. Even when you identify all of them, you're going to get a curveball, pun intended, at some point during the season that you weren't expecting, whether it's this athlete lied to that athlete, or this athlete's parents is telling their kid this when you're telling them that. This is why trust is so important. Trust is the keystone to all of it working, the team bond, right? If you do not have trust, or trust does not exist, you simply cannot move forward. It will not happen, all right? And listen, as is another part of coaching, you will have seasons as a coach, no matter how good you are, that will get away from you, right? Just because of the things that won't happen. It comes back to, what do you control? What can you focus on? How do you bring it back in and build your house back up to move forward? But it's not easy. But again, trust. I can't say that enough. And you have to create that on your team to the best of your ability.
Yep. I love that. And there's two references that I'm going to share with you, Caitlin, because I'm guessing you're not the only one in this situation. One's about, it's called the no asshole rule, and it has a lot to do with selection. And I'm just reading the title. And the other one is legacy. It talks about the New Zealand All Blacks. And I think if you're not familiar with that, many of you have heard this one over and over again, but it's really about, even with the most amount of talent, if that person doesn't fit, to your point early, from the very beginning, their lead, you've got to have talent, but they've got to bond together. And if that talent brings apart the group, then everyone's not performing at their best, right? So I think they're two examples of some resources that you might get some answers to.
Yeah, I'll also just quickly note on that accountability is a huge part of this as well. I will say again, trust is important, but if you can get your players accountable to the team, it really does help silence some of the voices outside and sometimes inside the team. We always talk about cancers on a team. You want to create an environment where a cancer can't survive, not one where it can thrive, right? So cancers thrive on a team when there's bickering, there's no trust, there's no accountability. When everyone's committed to the same trust, the same understanding of this is what we're striving for and how to get there. If a player walks in and is like, hey, we're going to do things my way, and 99% of the team's like, no, we're not, that person will either conform or won't be on the team for very long. So that's another way to shield, that's a good kind of metaphor, your team from those outside forces. But they will, especially in youth sports, you will always have those outside forces. It's your ability to kind of build up that shield and understand how they're going to keep coming. It's not going to stop, especially if you're coaching high school year after year after year. But here's the thing about identity. We're talking about identity. If you create a team that really has those things, over time, people are going to start coming into the team saying, hey, this coach doesn't mess around with this, and I'm not here to mess around with this coach. They really get it, right? They really understand what they're doing with the group. I'm not the expert. I always love it when parents say, like, well, I'm not the expert. Like, no, you're not. Yes. That's why I have the job. Okay. That's why I'm getting paid. So just wanted to add on to that.
And I think that sometimes it's a really good opportunity to say, hey, parent that talks a lot, come over here. Here's the whistle. Here's the clipboard. Go. You got 5 minutes. Yeah. But bringing that buy-in to the conversation, I think, again, Sam asked a good question. Just in terms of the younger athletes, youth athletes, particularly high school, when is there a time where you say, let's give them input? Because there's also times where you say, you know what? I'm the coach. You're the player. You're the athlete. Yeah. So when is there the time where you say, hey, you just focus on what you're doing and do that to the best of your ability. I'm going to focus on because you don't want me. I'm going to guarantee you, the Olympic Games, you don't want me getting in the boat to row. I might look like I know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to make the boat go any faster. So let me coach and you be the athlete.
Yeah, well, I think again, there's different points to this, right? So I think a lot of it is establishing this at the start. I can't stress enough how important like the first 48 hours with the team really are. The training camp week, whatever the sport is, of establishing who you are, how you're going to coach, and what the rules are on the team. With that said, I'm speaking to every coach on here. Don't ever break your own rules. You'll lose the team immediately, and you can't get it back. Sorry, I had to say that. All right, but here's the deal. You know, when you're coaching athletes, yeah, at times you have to be the coach. This is where captains really come into play for me. I think the captain position or the leader position is something that is often overlooked in especially youth sports, where it's just kind of given to the best player, or, you know, given to the player whose mom brings the big Gatorade bottles every week. You know, the captain of the team is your emotional connection to the team, right? That's number one. So your ability to enable them to be a good leader, it's reverted to them enabling you to be a good coach. You should be able to go to a leader of the team and say, hey, listen, how's the team reacting right now? Do you think they need to be a little bit harder today? Right? And give your captain the ability to express that to the team. Coach needs us to work hard today. We need to work hard today. Okay. I'll tell you a quick story. People remember stories. When I was first coaching job, head coach and GM, I was 22 years old, which is far too young to be a head coach now that I look back on it. But the first practice I ever ran, and this is a great story for exactly the question you asked. First practice I ever ran, I go on the ice, team comes on the ice. I'm 22, right? There's 21-year-olds on the team I played with, all right? I have no pucks. The captain comes up to me, what are we doing today? I said, well, I'm glad you asked that. We're going to skate for 60 minutes straight with no pucks. And they looked at me like I was crazy. I said, because if you don't understand what it means to skate for 60 minutes at a practice, how are you going to understand what it means to skate for 60 minutes in a game? So I put 20 minutes on the clock. We did 20 minutes of skating, took a 10-minute break, period break, 20 more minutes, period break, 20 more minutes, and then the game was over, right? Players were throwing up. You know, it was intense. It was intense, all right? Again, I don't think you can do that in high school now, but you can find something similar. You don't have to go super hard on them. All right, again, this is years ago. This is why this story is important. I had established right there the level of effort and work that I expected from this team. Halfway through the season, we were going through a little bit of a lull. I smile because I still can't believe this. Captain comes up to me. I've enabled this person. I've been very upfront. I want you to tell me how the team's doing. I want them to know that you're doing that, you know. And he says, hey, coach, we need to do that practice again. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way he's thinking, like, which practice? The drills with this one, the first practice. We need it. And I said, you're the captain. You're telling me you want me to skate everybody for 60 minutes straight with no pucks. He goes, yeah, we got to do that again. He says, I already told the team. And I'm thinking to myself that this was established so well that they understood the purpose. And this is really the key to the story. They understand the purpose of that practice, that they needed to be reminded of the level of work it took to win because they had forgotten. And that's really one of the keys, is establishing it early of, this is how hard I can work you. This is what I expect. Give me 100%. We won't have a problem. Right. And then making sure, again, you're enabling I still can't believe that captain asked for that, but enabling the leaders to be like, hey, give me a pulse. Right. One last note, you know, a lot of times when I talk to coaches, they say, well, I don't want to be soft on my team. I'm not asking anybody to be soft. I'm asking you to be honest. Right? Be very upfront. Okay? It's okay to tell your team, I'm the coach. This is my job. Your job's to play the games. This is what we're going to do. All right? And again, at different ages, the innocence changes. Okay? You know, I always joke, at a high school level, at a college level, as a coach, you're kind of looked up to. It's funny, when you work at a professional level, it doesn't really work that way. You're almost looked down on, right? I always joke, in high school and college, the coaches are gods. In professional, the athletes are gods. And you're just there to try and make the ship run. It's a totally different type of coaching. But anyway, I hope that story answered the question. Establish it early. Let them know. I can kill you if I need to. I don't want to, but buy in.
Love it, Lee. Awesome. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'm respectful of everyone's time. So good. Thank you very much. I know no one's moved a muscle. Everyone's hanging on the end of their chair. So we'll have to get you back to dive into the weeds a little bit more. But everybody, thanks for joining us. Really great, Lee, and thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you all for having me. Everybody take care.